Hey guys, it's Lewis from Recycle Bicycle Sales here. In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 bike setup mistakes that beginners make. Setting up your bike can be a very fiddly and daunting task, and it's also a very personal task. So beginners who are just getting into cycling sometimes don't know lots of different things about bikes. So hopefully in today's video, we can talk about 5 of the most common mistakes that we see, and we can talk about how to avoid them as well. Firstly, and most commonly, I want to talk about the seat height. We're talking about the distance from the pedal to where your saddle is, to where your bum is. So we're talking contact point on your foot to contact point on your bum. That's the first thing we're going to look at. Talking about seat height, as you can see with this bike here, that seat height for me would be way too low. Not only can I touch the floor, my legs are also bent on the floor. So that seat would be way too low. This is obviously the wrong size frame for me as well. But for the purpose of this, we're talking just about seat height. So I would need to bring this seat up quite a bit, because if I had a pedal on this bike, my foot would be there. When we're at the bottom of the pedal stroke, we want to have a relatively straight leg, maybe not completely locked out. We want to have a little bit of a bend in there, but we're definitely going to need to raise that seat height. If you're a little bit confused about how to actually set up your seat height, we've got a video further back on our YouTube channel. It was one of our first videos, and it was still one of our most well-received videos. So we talk about a few different ideas about how to adjust your seat height there. That might be a pretty cool one to look at if you don't know much about seat height just yet. To give a very, very quick summary of that video, one of the things that we talk about is that the distance from your pedal up to your bum, so the seat height, is going to be kind of similar to the inseam of your leg. So from the bottom of your foot all the way up to the top of your groin there, because that's the part where you're actually going to be sitting on the saddle. So we want to work out what that measurement is and then kind of go from there. Again, we talk about it a lot more in that other video there. But once you have worked out that you do want to either raise or lower your seat, usually there'll be a little bolt on the side here. This one just uses a seat clamp. So I'll loosen that bolt, and that way I can move the seat up and down to wherever it needs to go. So that is how you would adjust the seat to wherever it needs to go. And then we'll grab our Allen key again and tighten it back up. Now we're ready to ride. And then little note I'm going to put here as well, if you do adjust the seat height up and down, just look down from the back here and make sure that it's straight. Sometimes you might have accidentally moved the saddle to the side, and that's going to feel very uncomfortable when you're riding. So make sure it's nice and straight. Flowing on from seat height, we can talk about the seat angle. If I was to squat down here, what we'll find with most people is the saddle, the actual angle of the saddle, will be parallel with the floor. So it's nice and flat. Some people might accidentally, or choose to, have it pointing a little bit nose up, which in my opinion is a bit uncomfortable, or they might choose to have it nose down, which will help them move their body weight further forward and push down harder on the pedals. Also not very comfortable in my opinion, but it might be good from a performance side of things. So again, most people will have it flat with the floor. There's usually a couple of bolts around here that we can balance and tighten and loosen, and you can have a play around with on your own bike, and they will slowly adjust that angle of the saddle there. So have a play around with that as well. Another common mistake that I see with beginners is they've just bought a second-hand bike, and they've bought it from a professional racer who wanted an aerodynamic position and was a big time cyclist and everything. And now you've bought the bike and you're just getting into it. So sometimes the height of the handlebars might be adjusted. There's a lot of spaces underneath the stem here. This piece here is called the stem. There's a lot of spaces underneath here that can mean that you can actually lower the handlebars. So instead of sitting here on the bike, it might bring your hands a little bit lower, which is going to help you get a little bit lower and more aerodynamic when you're riding. A pretty common thing that I see with most beginners, or the way that most beginners like to have it set up, is the saddle will be around about there, and the handlebars will be a little bit lower. If you drew a perfectly straight line along there, they'll be a little bit lower, or they might even be at the same height as the saddle. As you get a bit more confident on the bike and a bit more used to maybe racing and performance, you might slowly lower the handlebars. But for most beginners, I tend to see, and I often recommend as well, having the handlebars nice and high, so that as you're riding, instead of being leant over like this and having to lift your neck up to see, you're in a bit more of an upright position, which will make it easier to look around for cars and see for danger as well. If you wanted to raise or lower your handlebars, I'll quickly show you how we would do it. For what it's worth, on this bike, the handlebars are not going to be able to come any higher because there are no spaces on top of the stem here. I was talking about these spaces down under here. There's none of them above here, but I'll show you how we can lower it. We've got these 2 pinch bolts on the side. We'll loosen them quite a bit. We don't have to take them out. We're just loosening them a lot. And then this top bolt, we'll take that all the way out. It's a pretty long bolt, so you might have to unscrew it for a little while. The handlebars will come off. And then however many spaces that we'd like to move to being above it, we can move them now. So you might want to leave one under there, or you might want to leave two under there. So now that means that we've lowered it by the width of this spacer, which is about 10 mil thereabouts. So I'll put that on top. And then tighten up the top screw here. We'll just tighten it up a little bit, 2 fingers. And then these pinch bolts, we'll do them up nice and tight so that the handlebars will stay exactly where we've left them. Now again, this is not the sort of thing that I'd recommend doing the day you bought the bike, but once you're a little bit more used to it and maybe you're slowly becoming a little bit more flexible, you might find it more enjoyable and more aerodynamic getting into a slightly lower position on that front end. This is a personal preference thing. Linked in with this, we can talk about making sure that the handlebars are straight. If you've done any work on your bike at home and you've removed the handlebars or a bolt wasn't done up quite tight enough, you might find that the handlebars might be a little bit off center. You might be looking at the stem as you're pedaling along, and then if you follow from the stem, we can look down and I can see the wheel here, and it's a perfectly straight line. It could possibly be a little bit off center. Maybe the stem is pointing off here while the wheel's going straight, which means that you have to hold the handlebars at a weird angle while you're riding. This could seem like a big deal and, oh no, how do I fix it? It's actually a really simple fix. I'll quickly show you how. So what we'll find on the side of the stem here, there will be a couple of little pinch bolts. It could be anywhere between 1 and 3 different bolts. They'll all be the same tool though. This one has 2. So what I'm gonna do is loosen these 2 pinch bolts. I'll loosen them quite a bit. And now what that means is that I can spin the handlebars freely from the wheel. So now I can, with my eye, I'm single eye, not 2 eyes, I'm squinting 1 eye. I can look down at the wheel and I can try and slowly adjust it to whatever is considered straight. And then I'll tighten up these pinch bolts again to a similar tension that they were at before. If you've ever had a crash on your bike and the handlebars might have hit the ground, or maybe you ran into the curb and the wheels all been twisted off to the side, these sorts of things can cause the handlebars to be off center. So if you've had an accident, it might be worth having a quick look at that too. The next common mistake that I see beginners make is not knowing enough about tire pressure. So maybe having the wrong tire pressure in their bike. I'll get Kevin to put a table up here so you can have a look at roughly about where we're sitting for different types of bikes. Like road bikes might sit at a really high pressure because the tires have a low volume, whereas a mountain bike with big fat tires might be the opposite. It might have a low pressure because it's a high volume, it's a much larger tire. So we kind of want to work out where we need to be between there. If you've got a bike that looks like this, and it's, you know, a rim brake road bike, it's got 23 or 25 millimeter tires thereabouts, you might sit at roughly about 100 PSI, give or take a little bit from there. Whereas if you've got one of the really modern road bikes with the disc brakes and the bigger tires like a 28 millimeter or a 30 millimeter tire, you might sit at more like 80 PSI, slightly lower pressure, slightly higher volume. And if you've got a mountain bike, because you've got the bigger tire, you're probably gonna run somewhere between 25 and 40 PSI, which is significantly lower than a road bike because we're at a much higher volume. So how do you actually pump the tire up? Well, I'm glad you asked, person behind the TV screen there. I'll show you. Step number 1, you're gonna need to grab a pump. You should be able to find these at your local bike shop. Hopefully you've got one sitting in a shed already, but we're just going to need a pump. A couple of tips that I've got when we're talking about pumping up the tires is if you don't have a bike pump yet and you're going to the local bike shop to buy a bike pump, I strongly recommend getting one that has a gauge on here, whether it's analog or if you've got heaps of money and you want to buy a digital gauge. Getting something that's able to tell you what pressure we're sitting at is super important, because when we put the pump onto the valve, it can tell me that we're sitting at, 40 PSI, which we're actually completely flat here. So it says that we're sitting at 0, which we are, but there you go, now we're at 10 PSI. It will tell you exactly where we're at, so you know that as you're pumping it, you're obviously pushing air into it. It's worth noting here that what I'm using is called a floor pump, or some people call it a track pump. If you've got a little hand pump, which will look like this, these are cool because you can carry them in your back pocket while you're out riding, or they fit in a small area, but the amount of volume that you can get per stroke, per pump, is so much smaller than a track pump. So from flat to full, pumping it up with a track pump, 30 seconds maybe, whereas pumping it up with one of these, it might take you 2 minutes, and that's a long time. All right, once you're up to pressure and you've remembered to close the valve, it would be a good idea for, as a beginner, so that you've got a bit of an idea, to do a bit of a squeeze test on the tire. You know, push it down with your thumb, squeeze it with your fingers, see sort of how it feels so you get a rough idea of what it's supposed to feel like. If you got a puncture on the side of the road and you had to use your little hand pump or the pump at the service station, or you're borrowing your friend's CO2 canister or something like that, it might not have a gauge on the side of the road. So you want to try and get it to roughly how that feels there. So just do that on your own bike at home. Give yourself a bit of an idea of what that tire pressure feels like. The next mistake is cleat position. Cleat position is one of those things that can be a little bit of a personal preference kind of thing, but I think there's a couple of guidelines that I'd still have anyway. We've got a road bike cleat on this side, and we've got a mountain bike or gravel style of cleat on this side. The cleat, you're able to, once you've got your screws in there, you're able to move it forwards and backwards, and sometimes even a little bit from side to side, or you can even twist it a little bit. So there's a lot of different movements that we can make all around where the cleat actually sits. Remember, this is the part that's going to attach you to the pedals on your bike. So it's one of those things that once it's set into a certain spot, your foot's going to end up remembering where that is. A pretty common rule of thumb that I tend to follow, and there might be someone in the comment section that disagrees with this, but I personally choose to have it pushed as far forward as I can so that I'm able to get the most power out of each pedal stroke. I find that that helps engage my calf muscle a little bit more, so I get a more efficient pedal stroke. Whereas if you're just getting into cycling and you're trying to keep your balance and it feels a little bit difficult, you might find it easier to move it down to the bottom because that's more over the ball of your foot where your foot sort of has knuckles. I don't know if they're called knuckles on the ball of your foot. It's kind of like the knuckles, like where your toes come into your foot, kind of in that spot there. And that might be a nice easy spot to keep your balance when you're riding. Also, if you're a mountain biker and you're doing jumps and all the downhill kind of stuff, you also might find it more comfortable if you've got the cleat further down on your foot. Because again, that's going to help from a balance side of things. You don't have to have the most efficient pedal stroke, you just have to land those hardcore jumps. So that might be a comfortable one. If you're a gravel bike rider and you want to get efficient pedal strokes so you can win the race, you might want to move it further forward. This is all a very personal preference thing. There's no good or bad answers. There's no correct or incorrect here. You kind of just do whatever you want. So have a play around with it. Another thing I might say as well is, I'm going to go a little bit nerdy for a second actually. Back when we used to sell shoes and cleats at the bike shop I used to work at, I used to get customers to do a jump and then I'd look at how their feet would land. So, you know, some people walk like that with straight feet. Some people might walk like that, you know, or some people might almost be the opposite, like pigeon-toed, and they might sort of have their feet pointed inwards. So everyone's got their own thing. I used to get people to do a jump, and however their feet land after a natural jump, that's probably how their feet are the most comfortable. So I can see that mine are pointed outwards a tiny little bit. Not a lot, but they're definitely pointed outwards a tiny little bit. So with that in mind, I could think about how the cleat is going to sit on my foot. And instead of having the cleat perfectly straight, I might choose to have it so that the heel of my foot is further inwards. So I might hold the cleat still and twist the shoe inwards a little bit. That's what I would do to set up my cleats. You can try some similar things yourself at home. And the final mistake that I see a lot of beginners making is getting excited about new bike day and forgetting about getting the correct frame size, which is actually quite important. So when you're at the bike shop and you've seen the beautiful bike in the window and, oh my gosh, it's my favorite color, and you know, Wout van Aert won at the race on the weekend on that bike and I really want that bike, or whatever it is, and you just buy it, you might not have got the right frame size. So it's worth having a chat to the salesperson, getting to test ride a couple of different bikes. First of all, seeing what's comfortable, seeing what you feel confident on, and even just getting the salesperson's opinion. Hey, does this look like the right frame size for me? A pretty common one that I could say that you could do yourself if you're just walking around the bike shop is, if you stand over the bike, between the handlebars and the saddle, we want to make sure that there's a little bit of room between your body and the bike. We don't want to be like sitting on the top tube, but we also don't want to have however much space that is, 10, 20 centimeters of space. We don't want to have that much. A pretty average rule of thumb that most manufacturers will recommend is having about 2.5 centimeters between your body and the bike. That's about 1 inch in American numbers. So we just want to make sure that we've got a little bit of space. That way, if you're standing at the traffic lights, you're not sort of tippy-toe standing on top of the top tube, which can make it a little bit scary, but you're also not just towering over this bike, kind of like I am here. Height will be one thing that you'll find with frame size, but as well as that, you'll find that the length of the frame will change. When we're talking about frame sizing, I won't go into it too in depth, but to give you a quick summary, we generally measure road bikes in centimeters. So you've got like a 50 centimeter or a 52 or a 54. The number that we're measuring there is from the center of the head tube to the center of the seat tube. So that will be 52 centimeters or 54 centimeters or whatever it is. And high school trigonometry will tell us that as one side of the triangle gets longer, so will the other side, which means it'll also get taller. So height is one thing, but length is another thing as well. If the frame is too big, it's gonna feel really long. If the frame is too short, it's gonna feel really short, and you might hit your knee on the handlebar as you're pedaling along. This is super important if you're looking at a second-hand bike on Facebook Marketplace or Gumtree or something like that, because the person selling the bike just wants to sell the bike. They don't really care if it's the right frame size for you. So still worth thinking about if you go to the brand new bike shop or the second-hand bike shop here at Recycle Bicycle Sales. But if you're buying a second-hand bike, this is incredibly important. Buying the wrong frame size will cause a load of issues, including just being uncomfortable and not being efficient on the bike as well. So make sure you get the right frame size right from the start. And if you're a young person and still growing, it's a little bit difficult because you might be between two frame sizes and you're not sure exactly which way to go. If you're still growing, I would try and go onto the bigger frame size and just put the seat down, bring the handlebars closer, kind of make it feel a little bit smaller so that way the bike can grow with you as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you've learned a little bit more about some common mistakes that we see beginners making. If you reckon that you want to know more and you reckon this video didn't teach you enough, let us know in the comment section below. I'd be happy to make a part 2. I could go on this topic for hours. So let us know if you've got any questions, or maybe you bought a bike and you thought, I wish I knew this other thing before. Let us know that in the comments below as well. Otherwise, I'm gonna say thanks for watching and we'll see you in the next video. See you guys.